Hey everybody, this is Jason Malott. We're going live again to answer your questions. Hopefully you have some today, but I'll talk about anything. Especially, I want to talk about my book, Adam is God, Eve is Us, Strange Stories about Aliens, Angels, and the Love of God from the book of Genesis. I published this book and it was extremely fun. But my next book is called Puppies and Napalm, The Extra-Dimensional Madness of the Prophets. That's the book that I'm really looking forward to. I'm really excited about coming out. It should be coming out here in the next few months. We just went through the final edits. And if I have a chance today, I'm actually going to want to kind of talk about some of the chapters that are in my next book. I feel like the next book, I really got to put a lot of myself into it. I really got to put a lot of the things that I believe, the way that I think, especially some of the things that make me different than, I guess you can say, mainstream Christianity, which I'm fine with. I've been that way for a long time now, longer than I can remember. But that's something I think that needs to be heard. I think that's something that people need to hear, especially right now, that we need to find ways that we can be more inclusive instead of exclusive. We need to find ways to be what Jesus originally meant Christianity to be, was something that was inclusive, something different, not tribal. I mean, the tribal thing was already been done. And a lot of times the problem, with the tribalism and the, I guess you could say it's more of a mob rule when you have a group of people that just think a certain way that's not right, and you get enough people. I like sometimes when I hear people they'll make a comment about something when it comes to maybe a gender situation or somebody's sexuality or whatever. They say, well, we're supposed to say blah blah blah. It's like they basically want to say, well, I'm supposed to say this, but I really don't want to say this, which is kind of part of the problem, why we won't change, why we won't become something better than what we are now. I mean, it's 2022, and I mean, look at what's going on in the news. I mean, not much has changed. We just have more access to it. You've got world leaders wanting to kill other world leaders to try to prove they have the biggest weapons, and it's been going on forever. And this is a reason why I feel like my next book is really very, very important. I'm at the end of my coffee, so I'll start to be able to turn up the rant in a second. But because I do talk about a lot of those type of social issues. I talk about a lot of, you say, political issues in a sense, without getting too political, because that kind of stuff is boring to me. God's kingdom is not of this world. It's a heavenly kingdom, and it's beyond the things that our world leaders can produce here. And it's a sad thing to think that the church has been duped into believing that they can use democracy or, republicanism, I guess it's republicanism, to fix the world ills, to try to make the world, the kingdom of God on earth. And the problem is they're starting at the wrong place. When you start from a place of capitalism, when you start from a place that is built on greed, it's built on selfishness. What can you do for yourself? How much can you do for yourself to better your life? If you have a system that it starts there, then obviously it's broken from the beginning. You can't use a broken system to fix something because it's already broken. And that hurts a lot of people, that the mom and pa, apple pie America of the 1950s, just the American dream is what people called it. That's all it was, because it didn't work out that way for the people who worked hard believing that it would, because that's what a lot of people were told. And I'm old enough to remember those things. We can't tell by the gray in my beard. I remember a time when they told you if you just worked hard, put your head down, work hard, do what the boss says, you're going to get far, you're going to go far in life. And no, that's not how it worked. Sorry to tell you. The contacts that you make in life and the connections that you make are way more important than your work ethic. Absolutely. I'm sorry. I mean, because I know of people who have worked in this country for 40, 50 years, working some of the hardest jobs ever. I'm talking, either construction jobs or even like the field workers, working in agricultural industries that have worked for, 30, 40 years, and they're barely making more than minimum wage today. I mean, why didn't the American dream work for them? What happened? I mean, that's a question that I think needs to be answered, but I also go into in my book. I talk a lot about the social justice issues, about treating people the way that they should be treated as a human. Not because this is what society has said this person's worth. This person that does a cooking job for you, or does a cleaning job for you, or does whatever they do, and you think they're worth $15 an hour because that's what society says. You're not really thinking of the fact that you are hiring somebody and underpaying them to the point to where they have to rely upon public services to be able to survive. I mean, that doesn't make sense. That you work a job, you think you're working. Your working is going to produce enough for you to have, the food you need and the medical care, but it doesn't. I mean, I don't know why more people don't think about that. That's not working. This is not, this concept of the American dream is only working for the wealthy, for the rich, for the top 2%, for the bosses and the managers and the CEOs and the people who, are basically exploiting the workers to get the money that they have. And it's not right. It's not fair. And I know a lot of people might have a problem with that, and I don't really care. So I'm going to say it until the day that I die. This society is built on something that is not fair for the normal person. I mean, I'm a white guy, and I grew up in a very poor situation. And even with the advantages I had, and the fact that I was probably better looking than a lot of people who applied for a job, or I had more charisma, obviously I'm better looking, right? You see that. And so I probably got into jobs that normally I wouldn't get into if I looked different, if I acted different, if I didn't have those things. It wasn't my work ethic. And I guess that's the thing that has been lost in a lot of ways to the way that we think, the way that we look at things. We don't think of the fact that our society is literally built to produce wealth for the top 2%. It's a society made from the very beginning. And I talk about this in my book. In one of my chapters, it's on Amos. He was an awesome prophet. Every one of my chapters in my new book, Puppies and Napalm, is a chapter that talks about a prophet, a different prophet in the Bible. And I talk about Amos in chapter 4 because I talk about social justice warriors and the concept of how the Christian should be a social justice warrior. The Christian should be the person standing in the front of the lines when it comes to standing against oppression, standing against fascism, standing against people taking advantage of the poor and those less fortunate than them. And I talk about that in this chapter. And Amos, I talk about how Amos was an oppressed worker. He had 2 jobs, which was not, we think it's normal now, which I think is hilarious. It's normal to have 2 jobs. Like, one job is definitely not enough. You need another job. And then some people, they have 3 jobs, and then they're doing the delivery stuff, delivering food, delivering groceries. They're doing all these extra things. You got to do so much stuff just to keep up with the just staying alive. And it's just not right. It's not, it doesn't make sense that we're okay with that. Even though there's more of us than there are of them, that there's more of the people who are suffering, the more of the people who are living without health care, are living without food, or living without the basic necessities, that are, doing things they would never do to be able to pay their bills. There's a line in that new Batman movie. I love it, by the way. Go see it. Where he's having a conversation, Batman's having a conversation with Catwoman, and he says something about how they made their choices, talking about some of the bad guys or whatever. And she says something along the lines about him being obviously a wealthy dude or a rich dude. Because, yeah, that's, when you're wealthy, you think, oh, well, you make the right choices, you get good stuff. If you make the wrong choices, you get bad stuff. It's like, yeah, if your mom and dad has millions of dollars and if you make a bad choice, they can pay an attorney to get you out of that bad choice, then yes, that works for you. But some people aren't given that choice. Some people don't have a choice of a rich mommy and daddy taking care of them. Some people have had to make decisions they probably wouldn't have made if they weren't put in the situations they're in. And that's something that we need to remember. I mean, no joke. We start pointing fingers at people that have been in jail, you got to stop for a second and think about it, because what would you have done in certain situations to be able to make things work? And I think that's something that is lost in our society, that we've lost that compassion. We've lost that, we've lost the basic empathy towards people. Oh wait, somebody had a question for me. I just saw that. Have you worked with Dixie? No, I don't know who Dixie is. Sorry. I've not worked with anyone named Dixie that I know of. Sorry about that. But so in my new book, I do actually talk about this whole concept, because Amos brings it up about the rich people taking advantage of the poor, taking advantage of people that were, just more oppressed than them. And these rich people had done it so much that God was speaking out in the book of Amos, and he was saying some things. He had some things to say to the rich at that time. And he was saying that it's time that you stop. You stop oppressing the workers. Stop taking advantage of the people who work for you. And this message is very clear in the book of Amos to the rich, to the wealthy, to the people who have power over other people, managers, leaders, CEOs, presidents. All of these people have power. There's this very stern warning that they need to pay attention to what they're using their power to do. Are they using it to get more wealth for themselves? Are you using all your power and influence just to try to make more and more money for yourself? And some people have asked me this question, like, Jason, what's the problem with being rich? It depends on how you got it. That's all I got to say. If God made you rich, that's awesome. Then, you know what? Use that wealth to do what God wants you to do. And my question is, how much is enough? I want you to remember that question. How much is enough? If you just sat down and ate the most amazing meal that money could buy for you, do you want to gag yourself and eat something from McDonald's? Come on. When is enough enough? And that's the problem a lot of times that rich people don't want to think about. They don't want to come to the grips of the fact that maybe they're living an extravagant life they shouldn't. And their extravagant lifestyle is actually hurting other people. And that's something you don't want to really think about, because when you're comfortable in your lifestyle and you're comfortable with all the things you have, you don't want to think about where all these things come from. You don't want to think about the sweatshops. You don't want to think about the kids making 15 cents a day. You don't want to think about all the things that it took, the poor fast food worker who gets coffee thrown in her face because the coffee didn't have sugar or something silly like that. That's the world we live in. We live in a world where entitled people think they have the right to oppress poor people, to oppress those that are less fortunate than them, or are forced to work a minimum wage job because they can't afford the college that you can, or the debt that you can. Maybe they can't get that kind of debt. Maybe they were stuck, with whatever they had to do, and that could have possibly just been going out and getting a job. I've had that situation in my life before. I started going to college, but then I couldn't afford it anymore. I had to quit the first time. I went back, but I'm saying the first time when I was young, I had to quit because I had a family. I had to pay the bills. I had to do those things. How can we live in a society where education is not the number one thing that is pushed? That education is not the absolute most important thing that is put up there? Because in my situation, education could have got me further in life a lot quicker. I was able to get to where I am today because of God. There was nothing in my own power and my own ability. I got bank jobs, I got promotions, I made lots of money, I did lots of things, and it was all because of God. He got me in through the back door, and I left through the same door as quickly as I possibly could, because I realized that financial industry world, and if you're in it, hear me for a second, that financial industry world is driven by greed. I worked at a place where I had a manager try to get me to find a way to get rid of my single moms, because during COVID, when COVID was going on, they would probably have to stay home with their kids, which means we wouldn't have employees. So let's find a way to get rid of them. I've worked in businesses where, you do whatever you can to meet the bottom line, to make the shareholders happy, to make the business look good. Even in nonprofits I've worked, or not-for-profits, because they're definitely not nonprofits, like credit unions, where the CEOs in 3 weeks make more than their entire teller group make in an entire year. It's just mind-blowing, the stuff that I've seen in my life. I've seen wealthy people, and I've seen wealthy people abuse that wealth, even people that shouldn't abuse that wealth, that should have cared about other people. I've seen men do horrible things that men do when they're in power, and I've seen it. I've been a part of industries that have exploited people, that have taken advantage of people, and I repented of that, and I got out of it because it was wrong. It was wrong what people were doing. I was in the the housing, the first crash in the early 2000s, 2005, 2006. I saw people taking advantage of, their own people who couldn't speak, English. They were using their, because they could speak English and another language. They were using that to take advantage of people, to get people into houses they shouldn't have got into because of greed, because of lust, because they felt like they wanted, the new Escalade, they wanted the new swimming pool in the backyard. They wanted all those things instead of searching out what God wanted them to do with the money. I didn't really, in my life, I have learned one thing, is that when I trust God, he always takes care of all the other stuff. When I just trust in him, I don't worry about money and stuff like that. I don't, because I don't think it's worth it. It's gross. It's disgusting. I as a bank manager, when I'd open up a vault, I had a pretty big vault that had a lot of money in it, and smelling what that money smelled like was the most disgusting smell that you will ever smell in your life. I will tell you, I'll put it up against somebody even in a crematorium. You open a vault full of money, it is the most disgusting smell you will ever smell. And if you didn't know that, then guess what? You're learning that today from an expert. I've smelled a lot of money and it stinks. So when I talk about Amos, the prophet Amos in the Bible, I'm talking about these type of things, the things that, that James, the brother of Jesus, here's something you might not know, and this is pretty cool. So Jesus was James' brother. James grew up with him. I mean, half brother, obviously, because Jesus was the son of God and James was the son of Joseph, obviously. So James grew up with Jesus. He would have saw how Jesus was. And when he became one of the main pastors of the Church of Jerusalem, and he wrote a letter. And in his letter, he says something. First, in the beginning, he points out how people were showing partiality to the rich, that they were giving the rich people the good places to sit. But then all the poor people, they're like, you go sit in the floor over here. You go over here. We don't have a chair for you. And he says, you need to stop it. And then later on, I like how he says, woe to the rich, weep and howl. Now, he says the words weep and howl, like literally scream, be so upset at what's going to come about in your life, you need to weep and howl. And he says, because the judgment's coming for all the wages that you held back from your workers. And he says the judgment is coming from the Lord of hosts. Now, I don't know if you know what that word means, the Lord of hosts. The Lord of hosts means the Lord of the armies of God. The Lord of the armies. He's literally the general. He's showing up with his armies because he's pissed off. Because you have exploited your workers. You've held back wages that belong to them. And he says you've heaped up judgment for the coming day. I say this in my book. I don't like to, but I have to. There's a judgment coming. I'm sorry to say it. I don't like thinking that way because I'm not that type of person. I'm not into that kind of stuff. I don't like, but I know there is a judgment coming on the church because of the way that we have mistreated the people who worked for us, the people who are in our power. There's a lot of things that I can, point fingers at, which I'm not. But I will point fingers at this one thing because I think this is one thing that we can all change. When you go to eat somewhere, you ask those employees, are they treating you well? In my last live video, I mentioned this, and it's worth me saying this again. Martin Luther King. When did he start really making a difference and started really moving along his message was when they started boycotting the buses. And then they started boycotting all the stores that weren't black owned. And that's where the whole term black owned came from, is that he said, you go to the stores that are black owned, you take your money away from these people that are trying to treat you bad, that are trying to oppress you. You don't give them power in your life. It's called the third way. Jesus always used it. There's three ways. You can respond with violence, you can respond with despair and just letting violence happen to you, or you can respond with a third way. And I'm a Christian anarchist, and I believe in the third way, that there are non-violent ways to fight. And how Martin Luther King did it is they fought economically, and it worked. It worked. He took the money out of the economy that was there when, because you had towns that had tons and tons of African American people that lived there. So I think in a lot of ways we could do the same thing today if we just start asking people, how does your work treat you? Oh, okay, they mistreat you here? I don't want to give my money to this establishment. I'm leaving. Don't give your money to places. If you see some idiot yelling and screaming at some poor little, speak up. Say, hey, there's no reason for that. Or better yet, just say, hey, if this is the type of people that are here, I'm going to go somewhere else. I mean, don't give your money to places that promote something that you don't believe in. And this is where Christians have so messed up. They got so caught up on issues that were not the issue. Gay marriage has never been the issue. I'm sorry, wake up. It's not. It's not, and it never has been. And when people have tried to rally around something that that really had no real, I mean, some gay dudes want to get married. There's nothing about it in the Bible. Sorry. I've studied the Bible by saying this. I'm not just saying, oh, there's nothing in the Bible. I've never read it. No, I've studied this thing, and I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that there's nothing in there that says anything about two men wanting a monogamous relationship, or two women wanting a monogamous relationship, or a male and a female wanting a monogamous. I'm sorry. That's not the issue. And that's the problem, is the church has made that the issue. Instead of, how are we paying our employees? Are we utilizing capitalism to oppress our employees? Well, when I read in the Bible, I read that God is going to judge the people who do that. You know, it's funny because Billy Graham over and over and over again in his preaching would say that God's going to have to raise up Sodom and Gomorrah from the grave and apologize to them if he doesn't judge America. The sad thing is he was pointing at abortion and homosexuality and a lot of things that I don't absolutely believe have anything to do with what I'm talking about, because they don't. What I'm talking about is the way that you oppress the poor people and the hell that you create by doing that. If your workers are being exploited, that is something that you should be worried. Are they being treated right? Are they being paid right? Do they have to use public assistance to be able to get their food, to get their medical coverage? Do they? And you're a Christian? Sorry, you should probably consider that. You're a wealthy Christian? What are you doing with your wealth? What are you doing with your money? Are you helping people? Are you trying to create heaven here like Jesus said? Or are you giving money to political parties that are going to move your weird traditional agendas? That's the sad thing, is I want to tell you this. Your tradition is not Christianity. Jesus told the Pharisees that you're missing the point because of your tradition. Yeah, your tradition, your American tradition, might be different than what Jesus thinks. Jesus wasn't a capitalist. He wasn't a Republican. He wasn't white. He wasn't American. He was very far from the world that we live in. Middle Eastern, Jewish guy living under the oppression of Rome. Yeah, it's night and day. And in the Bible story, you know, the bad guys were the imperialists, the Romans, the ones who had conquered and won. And the oppressed people, those were always the good guys. They were usually the small little countries, like the Middle Eastern guys. So in this story, I just want you to know, and I'm sorry to bust your bubble here, or I'm sorry to pull this Band-Aid off, but America is not the hero in the story. America never was. America, if you want to try to compare America to something in the Bible, it's Rome. That's the closest thing you can find. And Rome crucified Jesus. And here we sit today, modern day Rome, still doing the same thing. And nothing's changed. The sad thing is that we get so caught up on the people who might want to say, I don't believe in Jesus, or I don't believe in it this way, or I don't. Instead of thinking about, okay, instead of me going after people who don't believe the way I believe, why don't I try to figure out what I believe first before I start trying to go after people who are still trying to figure out what they believe? Because as a church, I want to ask that question: what do you believe? As a Christian, what do you believe? I mean, what is it that, and I don't just mean something that you say on a Sunday or something that you said at one point in your life, or, you know, your bumper sticker on the back of your car, or your shirts you wear, or the cross you wear, or any of that kind of stuff. I'm not talking about that. It's your lifestyle. It's the things that you do. What do you do with your money? Do you use the power that you have to oppress people that are less than you? What do you do with your words? Do you allow idiots to stand around and say things they shouldn't around you when they're talking about people maybe that are more oppressed than you, less fortunate than you? You know, when people talk about, you know, the LGBTQ community, what do? Just kind of, oh yeah. You know, people, you know, everybody likes trans bashing for some reason. You know, are you just going to stand there and let them say whatever they want to say instead of going, you know, that's a human and we shouldn't judge them? And honestly, at the end of the day, it's between God and them what they're doing to themselves, not you. And they have to stand before one person only, and that's God, not you. So when Jesus said, judge not, lest you be judged, for with the same measure you judge, shall you be measured, he does not want us to judge what somebody's intentions, what somebody's inside what they're trying to do. What he wants us to judge is things in our life that are contrary to creating heaven on earth. If what I'm doing is taking away from the kingdom of God, and if I'm a rich person not using my wealth to forward the kingdom of God, I'm doing that. If I'm a manager, if I'm somebody who has power over other people, and I'm using that power to only progress my own career, my own self, if I'm not helping other people in their career to get further, then I'm sorry, you're working against God. I'm going to be honest with you. I've always been more practical in my belief when it comes to Christianity. And I don't just want to have a bunch of fairy tales that I kind of, you know, pull out every now and then and repeat. And I mean, what good is that? I actually believe the stuff it says. And I found that when I believe it, when I'm living it, when I'm doing these things work out right for me. When I'm not doing it and I look out for myself and try to, you know, get greedy, then things don't work out for me. And I mean, I'm 25 years into being a Christian, right? Yeah. Gosh, I'm old. 25 years into being a Christian. And I'm not new to this stuff. So I talk in my book in that chapter, in chapter 4, I talk about Amos. And like I said, it's a real stern warning to the church because I get it. There's going to be greedy people that don't believe in Jesus. I get that because they don't believe in the same thing that we do. They don't understand. They don't have the same understanding. The God of this world has blinded their minds. I like that. I like how Paul says that because, you know, it's very true in the fact that the God of this world is money. It's all about greed. It's all about making more money. And yes, greed and making money will blind you to the people around you, to the things that you're hurting, to the people that you're hurting. You might be a CEO of a company. Like, okay, for instance, somebody high up in a Walmart, and you probably go to bed not even thinking about the fact that your poor employee is sitting at home trying to figure out how they're going to raise enough money to get their teeth fixed because they can't afford any of the healthcare or anything that they need to be able to get this thing done. And I'm just saying, you got to think about those things. Think about what you're doing. How is it affecting other people? That is so much more important than getting caught up on things like sin. Jesus paid the price for sin. Yes, I fail. Yes, we all fail. Jesus paid the price so that we don't have to be punished for that failure. But the thing we have to realize is that if we're doing something that's hurting other people, M what? Oh, I don't know what the question is. EMMM. Okay, I'll figure it out. But yeah, if we're sitting here and we're saying that we're Christians. Oh, what am I talking about? Oh, okay. Actually, I am talking about my new book that's coming out. This is the book that I already have out. I got a new book coming out, and it talks. One of my chapters talk about social justice, and I talk about how our wealthy people, how our people that are in power, people that are managers, are CEOs, people who have power in the sense that they're wealthier than other people. What are you doing with that power to help other people? And the book of Amos in the Bible goes all into this whole concept of social justice and treating people properly and taking care of the poor, and that the wealthy have a responsibility to the people that created the wealth that they have. And I mean, really, at the end of the day, and this is kind of what I was trying to come around to, is that when you get caught up on sin that the church says is sin, like not going to church, that's a sin, because you didn't show up at a building on a certain day. Not, reading this book enough. I don't know how much is enough. The apostles didn't have this whole thing. A lot of the people in the Bible didn't have this whole thing. It took a while to get this. So, yeah, no. It's not about saying your prayers and eating your vitamins. It's about the way you treat other people. I want you to understand this. Christianity is about the way you treat other people. It's about what sort of influence you have, what the influence you have. What are you doing with it? How are you influencing people? How are you helping people? The power that you have, how are you using that power? How are you using that power to help other people? What are you doing? And really, that's the question. And that's the question that I ask in the book, and I specifically to the church. And it's a stern message in the sense that I feel like as the church, because I am part of the church, whether I go to the same building that you do or not, I don't think that we've been doing a good job here. I think we've alienated a lot of people that we should be bringing in. I think that we should be standing at the front of some of these picket lines, some of these, different protests, some of these things that we should be in front of, because as Christians, we should be for social justice. We should care about how people are being treated, whether they're oppressed, whether, are they being oppressed by their employers? We should be, when these McDonald's workers are wanting better working environments, they're having people throw hot coffee in their face for $15 an hour. And we're okay with that? No, as Christians, we should say, hell no, we're not okay with that. We're not okay with that. We're not okay with a world oppressing the 98% that's a lot less fortunate than the other 2%. We should be, as Christians, because there are more of us than there are of them. And this is the thing I want you guys to hear. You can change things. You can make a difference because there are more of us than there are of them. And they know that, and they're scared of that, because we can actually make a difference. We can change this greedy system. We can change this capitalist society that's so bent on just trying to make as much money as you can. We can change it. We can change it to the way the apostles changed it back in the book of Acts, where they all joined together and they all helped each other out. It was more about what can we do to bring the kingdom of God to this earth, not what can I do to get a new iPhone, a new computer, a new car, a new house, a new this, a new that. Or maybe it's just, what can I do to just pay my bills? Because that's kind of the world we live in right now. And I think it's by design. Absolutely. Wage slavery, look it up. I mean, it's something that's very real. People today live in it every single day. They have to go to 5 different jobs to be able to pay their bills. Why? The problem isn't resources. The problem is not. The resources are there. The problem is not resources. The problem is allocation. All that money, all the things that you need, all the things that you should have to live this life, they're just in other people's bank accounts. I mean, really. People who have taken those wages, usually by oppression, usually by taking advantage of somebody that's less intelligent than them, convincing somebody that doing the hardest job in the world is worth the least amount of money. But if I can sit in an office like I did, I worked a lot of different jobs. I worked in a job where I got to sit in an air-conditioned office with a nice little window, looking outside all day long, hitting a few buttons on my computer, sending an email, and act like I'm, worth the triple digits they're paying me. No. While the guy outside was, trimming the bushes and mowing the lawn and doing all these things that, he's working his butt off and probably been doing it for 20 years, believing in an American dream that told him if he just worked hard enough that eventually one day he was going to get through. You know what? That's not true. It's a lie. It's a lie. Thank you. FSHDCVILE. Sorry. I am really lame when it comes to trying to figure out people's names, but thank you for all the likes. I really appreciate it. And if you're one of the 98%, like the rest of us, I want you to feel good. I want you to rest and be at peace, because James, old Jimmy, brother Jimmy from the Bible, Jesus' brother, promised us that there's going to come a day of vengeance against the rich. There will come a day. He tells the rich, he says, weep and howl, for your day is coming. For the Lord of hosts is coming to hold you accountable for all of the wages that you held back from your workers. That day of reckoning is coming. So, brothers and sisters out there who are like me, who aren't in the top 2%, there is hope coming. God promises he will change it. He will judge this system. And I want to be part of the ones that are on the other side of it. What does it look like on the other side? That's a thought. What does a society look like that's not just bent on you like rushing to work and your 2 or 3 jobs every day, barely spending any time with your kids, barely spending any time with your significant others, barely spending any time with yourself? Think about that. What would a life look like on the other side of that? It's possible. It's not just a pipe dream. There were a lot of smarter people than me that believed in this type of world. Leo Tolstoy, who wrote the book War and Peace, at the end of his life actually gave up all of his publishing rights to all of his books he wrote, including War and Peace, and lived a really simple life at the end of his life because he had figured some of these things out. And he was part of a very wealthy Russian family. He gave it all up, working out in the fields at the end of his life. So people smarter than me have thought this way too. This is not just some crazy dude on TikTok ranting about rich people. No, I am actually talking the truth here, and it's truth that is older than me. A lot of people have thought about it. And I know there's a lot of people out there that you've probably thought the same thing I thought. This isn't right. There's something not right about this system. This is not the way things are supposed to be. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, gosh, one dude, one guy in the entire billions and billions of people on this world, one guy, one person in power, one leader in power can do this much damage to the world. I mean, think about it. Think one person. This is why I'm a Christian anarchist. I want to make this clear. This is why let me take another drink. I'm gonna rant for a little bit. Look on the news. Look at how much this guy in Russia can do. One guy, because he's a leader. He's in power. People have chosen to give up their power so that this guy can have the power. And he got enough people to agree that they should give up their power to let this guy have the power. Now, all of those people live in a country that their whole banking system has went down the drain. They live in a country to where they don't even let the media, the media's quitting because they can't even say the things they want to say. And then what else happens? And then you've got all these other countries, the gas prices and the Ukrainians, with all the refugees. You have all these problems. See this with me for a second. Please, man, my eyes are that's why I keep my glasses on. I look like I didn't sleep enough. Please, see this with me for a second. The power of one person can do that. One person can have that kind of power. And the Russian people gave it to him. That's why I'm a Christian anarchist, because I don't believe giving one person that kind of power is ever a smart decision. Perfect power corrupts perfectly, that whole thing, the whole Julius Caesar and it obviously was a Julius Caesar quote, but in the Dark Knight, you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become a villain. It's time for a change. It's time for something new. It's time that we give up on the idea that having a leader, having somebody besides God over us is the right way to run a world, because it's not. And you will never find salvation. You will never find salvation. I want you to hear me. I'm an old man saying this, so I'm not just some young kid trying to tell you that this is the way the world works. No, you will never find salvation in a president. You won't. You keep looking as hard as you want to look, you will never find it. Because my question to you is, what did it take for that person to get to the place that he's at right now? Just think about that. Why are all presidents wealthy? And why do they all come from money? I'm just saying, I want you to think about that. What does it, even if you wanted to be elected, an elected official in a local election, you can't do it without money. You've got to have money. That doesn't make sense. So only the wealthy can run for places of political power. And people who maybe weren't raised in the same wealth as somebody else, they weren't as privileged as other people, don't have the same power or ability to run for office. Just think about that for a second. Now, when you actually kind of take it backwards and really look at it, you realize you're like, that just doesn't make sense. Is that a biblical system? Does Jesus think that's the way things should be? And I'm not, people always get mad. It's like, why do people want to talk for Jesus? I ain't talking for Jesus. I'm just saying, I've read the books about him a lot. A lot in my life. A lot. And Jesus was definitely somebody who stood up to the leadership of the time. He stood up to them. And he did it the way he knew how to do it, which was using a third way. And I talked about this earlier, how Martin Luther King used his economic power and had all the people that were following him said, stop spending money at places that aren't going to, treat you right. The people that are going to go with the Jim Crow laws, we're not going to spend money there. We're going to spend money in black-owned businesses that are going to actually take care of their own people. If we did the same thing, but we did it with the way that we spent our money as Christians, if we did it as the way that are we going to give money to places that take advantage of their employees? No, we shouldn't. We shouldn't do it. We shouldn't give money to places that don't take care of their employees. Because we have the power. Now we have power. We have money. We have money in our hands. That's the power. And what are we going to use that power to do? Are we going to use that power to continue the oppression? Giving money to, this place that, even though might have the most amazing pancakes in the world for $15, their workers are treated like garbage and only make $15 an hour and, can barely even get $1 tip without, it's like people act like you almost have to, give them a massage and come out to the back before they're going to give you more than $1 in a tip. That's what I'm saying. It's just the world we live in now. A lot of people don't understand what they're doing in the fact that they are oppressing workers. They're oppressing people that are less fortunate. And it needs to stop. It needs to stop. So, but anyways, finishing my rant, that's why I'm a Christian anarchist, because I have seen the damage that leaders have done. I've seen the damage. Look at what Donald Trump did to the church. Oh my gosh. I still to this day, it's going to take forever for that to heal. That's a nasty gash. That is an open, nasty wound. That's going to take a long time for that to heal. Just think about that. There are people in churches prophesying. And when I say prophesy, I'm talking Pentecostal, old school. I'm saying stood up, thus saith the Lord, blah, 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 Donald Trump. There were people in their actual churches standing up, speaking like they're speaking from God, and praising this person that was the farthest from what Jesus was like. But yet, it was like the great white hope. It was the great, Christian hope that this man, he's a Christian. Oh, yeah. And his favorite book is the Bible. Yeah, okay. But if somebody says they're an apple tree, but they don't produce apples, then are they an apple tree? And Jesus said you'll know them by their fruits. Whether it be the false prophets who prophesied things about Donald Trump that absolutely did not come about, and it was horrible for you to even think you should have said those things, or the person who thinks they're doing things for God, but yet what is the outcome of the work that you're doing? Is it creating more chaos? Is it creating more evil? Is it bringing people together? Like Jesus said, at the end times, he'd bring all people under one head, under Christ, under the church. Everybody was come back together again. If it didn't, think about it. Our world has become more divisive. Think about 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years. Just keep going back. You'll see that, Donald Trump was the worst thing that could happen to the church because it made the whole world so much more divisive. Because you had a whole world of people who didn't believe the way you believed when it came to your Bible. And they saw you pushing up a leader that definitely didn't look like the Jesus that they knew about. I'm not surprised that they call you a hypocrite. They didn't want anything to do with you or your church and all your red hats, I don't blame them. I don't blame him at all. I couldn't believe it. As somebody who's been a part of the church world for so long, I was an associate pastor. I was a youth pastor. I did a lot of that stuff. And in the process of doing that, I mean, I found, there's a lot of stuff that goes on that is not from God. It's not Jesus. It's all ego. It's all like some of these men, they wanted to have this political power. They felt like, like Donald Trump was going to share this great power with all these different evangelical ministers. No. Dude wants power for himself. The book of Samuel said it very clearly when it said, to the Israelites, when they cried out for a king, Samuel's like, well, the king's going to take all the best of your land, is going to take all the best of your daughters, is going to take all the best of your stuff and make you work his fields. And Samuel was right. He told the Israelites the truth. So, but that is another thing I talk about in my book. And I have a whole chapter 5, which is called This Doesn't Mean That, But We're Making Things Great Again, The Lamentations of Jeremiah. And this is kind of an interesting one because I talk about Alexander the Great, but I give all these examples of Alexander the Great that are very similar to another president that wanted to make things great. And I talk about that. I talk about false prophets. I talk about some of the false prophets that stood up and said things about Donald Trump that were not true. That he's supposed to be some great church savior, I guess. I don't know. It's sad. When the church tries to mix politics, it always gets nasty. It gets disgusting. I mean, it started back in, back during the time, it started during his time, but I mean, you had a time that Christianity was considered against the law, that the government's official stance was that these Christians were putting Jesus over all these other leaders, to the point that when another leader tells them to do something that Jesus didn't say to do, that they would rather die than do the thing you want them to do. That was the problem that Rome was running into. These Christians were not budge. They would allow themselves to die before they obeyed the empire. Well, interestingly enough, as the Christians in the empire grew more and more and more and more, they finally just joined together. We'll make all Roman citizens Christians. And when you mix Christianity with political, it just gets disgusting. You got people with shields and swords, rushing in to kill Muslims in the name of Jesus. You have all that kind of garbage going on. And it's not right. It's something that needs to change. And it's been going on since the very beginning. Churches always tried to mix politics, have always wanted to get involved in ways that had to do with, putting people in power they felt were the moral majority would approve of. It's sad. I go to the college of the person who founded the moral majority. I go to his college, and it's interesting when I learn things about people that at one time I might have respected. I mean, and I'm not going to say I disrespect anyone who's in power, because the Bible talks against that. I'm not saying that. But what I'm going to say is I can call what they've done wrong, and I can say that some of the decisions they made were wrong. And people who ponied up with the moral majority back in the 80s and got, Ronald Reagan in power, and, they were going to get rid of all the drugs and abortion and homosexuals and all this stuff, and it was horrible. There's a really interesting story about somebody who a lot of the church world liked to knock, Tammy Faye Baker. She was Jim Baker's wife, but more than that, she was actually her own personality, who was on a Christian kind of talk show thing for years. I mean, they kind of created the variety show, Christian show, and she would sing and all that. She was a really nice lady. She got tied up in a lot of crazy things, but one of the things I noticed was during the 80s, when all the moral majority were speaking out against the homosexuals, she would go to hospitals of AIDS patients and pray with them, as people that even the regular world, I'm not saying Christian world, even the regular world wouldn't touch, because they didn't have a clue how AIDS worked. Tammy Faye Baker's going in there and talking with these people and interviewing them and trying to love on them. So there's always been a light in the darkness of evangelical Christianity. There's always been a light. There's always been lights. And I I've had some people ask me, because of hearing the things I've had to say and some of the things I talk about in my book, both my books, why haven't I just started my own church, or why haven't I just started my own? It's like, no, I'm not starting a new religion. I'm not starting a new church. I'm not starting a new denomination. Because I don't believe that's not the solution. The solution isn't another church. It's not. The solution is a change of mindset. And that's not going to come because some guy gets up on a stage every Sunday and tells you stories out of the Bible. That's going to come when people realize that Christianity is about how you treat other people. Christianity is creating heaven in this world. Don't get so caught up in the heavens and hells of tomorrow that you miss the ones that are being created today, because those are the ones that matter. Jesus spoke way more about those. I'm going to say he only spoke about those heavens and hells, because the heavens and hells that we're creating now are the ones that matter. And they matter way more than what's going to happen after you die. I know that's not a popular message in Christianity, because it's easier to keep people afraid and going to your church when you tell them, unless you believe the way I believe, you're going to spend, eternity in God's basement where he goes down and burns you every now and then. I mean, I don't believe that stuff. How God judges people is between them and God. If God uses hell of some sort to get somebody to come back to him, that's between him, God. It's between the person who died and God and what he wants to do. But what he does to get people to change their minds, to repent, to turn to him, that's between him and the person. That's not my business. My business is to take care of me. That's it. My business is right here. I need to make sure that I am doing the things that I'm supposed to do to create heaven in this world. So when Jesus talked to the Pharisees and he talked about hell, when he called them you hypocrites, you brood of vipers, how will you escape being condemned to hell? Jesus, when he said that, he was referring to a physical place that was right outside of Jerusalem, the Valley of Hinnom, Gehenna, if you want to use the actual word Jesus used, Gehenna, which was the dump. It was a desecrated place. Josiah desecrated it because before it was a place that was used for Moloch and Baal worship, where they would burn their children in the fire. And it was a horrible place where the lepers hung out because they couldn't go into the city. There were jackals and all these kinds of dogs and whatever kind of animals out there constantly gnawing on the bones and the meat, and the lepers weeping and crying they can't go inside, and there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth, and the worms are never quenched because it's a dump. It's full of the dump, and the fires are always burning because that's how it's always been, even during the time of when they worshiped Baal and Moloch. They've always had the fires burning there. So anyways, the point of what I'm saying is when Jesus talked about heaven and hells, he was talking about the heaven and hells that we create here and now. And the Pharisees, he was telling them, where they were creating a hell that was similar to the hell right outside of Jerusalem. They were creating that for other people, and it needed to stop. It needed to stop. And so I've learned that what am I doing to create heaven and hell in people's... oh, that was nice. Thank you. Somebody just sent me something. I appreciate that. Thank you. Sorry, I'm still learning this TikTok thing. So I saw you sent me something, but I couldn't see your name. But thank you. One of the things that I talk about in my next book, Puppies and Napalm: The Extra-Dimensional Madness of the Prophets. We talked about, the social justice warriors with Amos. This doesn't mean that, but we're making things great again. That's with Jeremiah. I also talk, and this was a fun one. It's called Who Painted the Ark? And it's with David the Dancing Prophet. This kind of ties into basically what we've been talking about. And it's something that I got from one of my old favorite preachers. He was a very good preacher. I didn't agree with everything he had to say, but he was a good preacher. His name was Leonard Ravenhill. And he had a whole message that he preached called Who Painted the Ark? And I kind of wanted to borrow that for my message because it kind of ties into some of the things he was getting at that had to do with how the church was trying to become more glamorous, to become more inviting in the sense of, aesthetics, to try and turn this old Christian religion into something prettier and newer that, stands the modern test of time. And I kind of go at it from a different perspective. I go at it from the perspective of that we've tried to change the message. I don't care what it looks like. I mean, if you had a bunch of people that wanted to make a church that, looked like the inside of a circus, or if it looked like the inside of the Sistine Chapel, I mean, if that's what you want, I don't really care. It's the message. See, that's the thing. And so when I talk about who painted the art, I talk about the message. How has the message of Christianity been changed? Compared to the things that the apostles would preach and teach, compared to the things that like Peter would talk about, like James, John, Paul, how has that message changed today? Are we still telling people the truth? That how you treat other people, how you create heaven and hell here, how you're involved with the weak and the oppressed and the people that need your help. That's what's it. That's what this world is about. How socially active is the church you go to? I'm not talking politically active. That's silly. That's just, Actually, I would say that was a negative. If I went to a church that was very politically active, it would be like, well, politically active in what way? I mean, are you trying to push laws through to help homeless people have places to go? Are you trying to push laws through that protect women's rights, or protect, gender rights, or protect, I don't know. What are you doing that, or are you just trying to get Republicans in power? Because I don't really see that as something interesting or something that God would be interested in. But how socially active is your church? Think about that. What message are you hearing from the pulpit when you go on a Sunday morning? Are you hearing people tell you about being active in social issues, to be involved, to be aware of things that are going on and what you can do to help these people? Or is it just telling you about something else you're doing wrong in your life so you can feel bad about it and come back the next week to learn some more? Yeah, that's definitely not a Christianity I want to be involved in. And so one of my other chapters, chapter 7 in my Puppies and Napalm book, is my chapter. Basically, I had to write a chapter because I wanted to do this in one of my books, because he's a writer that I really have always appreciated. Hunter S. Thompson. So I had this chapter is called Fear, Loathing, and Everything Phony, the Gonzo Report with Old Zeke and Prophet S. Thompson. S. Thompson. Oh, wait. I want to make sure they didn't cut that off. Yeah, they did. Okay. My page cut it off. I'm like, oh no, did I forget the S? Okay. So I do talk about Hunter S. Thompson, and I kind of compare the concept of making people afraid of something to believe in it. And using fear. That's why I call it Fear, Loathing, and Everything Phony, because using that whole, really, the fear and loathing idea is trying to make people feel guilty and try to make people feel like garbage and feel like they're not good enough, and scare them into believing in a religion. That is not the way. That's not God. That's not Jesus. That's not the Bible. That's not Christianity. That never was. Jesus loves you just the way that you are. And he doesn't want you to be scared into believing him, because if you're scared into believing him, that's kind of a toxic relationship. It's definitely unhealthy. So let me read you something out of this chapter here. Let me try to get to it. Sorry, I'm zooming in here. Where am I? All right. Okay. Oops. Oh, sorry. While I'm zooming there, I just found this poem. So this was a poem that I wrote a bunch of poems and put them in my book. Here's another poem from my book. This is called In Necessity of Morality. Morality is comfort. We decide by what is easy. Take pride in our ability to be a consumer, and we consume. They glamorize real terror, and we pay the bill. What keeps us alive is what we ignore. Laugh it off, drink it up again. Tip the glass as it burns. It helps me to forget. Try and explain this to your children. Their children aren't as important. Their lives hold no value. My life, all that matters. I'm hungry. I'm thirsty. I need this. Don't I deserve it? It's not my fault. I just want to be comfortable. That's one of my poems. It's called In Necessity of Morality. I just wanted to read that to you on my way to trying to find what else I was going to read to you there. Let me get to this chapter here. So basically, in this chapter, I talk a little bit about Hunter Thompson. There's a quote that I use. This is from Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. It's from the book. All I did was take your gibberish seriously, and you see where it got me. My primitive Christian instincts have made me a criminal. I thought it was a cool quote by Hunter Thompson. But I kind of talk about the idea of being scared into a religion, being made afraid to believe something, which doesn't make any sense. Like, why? Why do you want to be scared into believing in something? That's not a healthy way to believe in. And I talk about there's a book called Fear. It's from somebody named Johanna Burke. She discusses basically how fear is the cornerstone of Christianity. And she quotes William Booth, who was the founder of Salvation Army, and he said, "Nothing moves people like the terrific. They must have hellfire flash before their faces or they will not move." So I think it's interesting that from her observation, Christianity, the cornerstone of Christianity is fear. And they have to have hell flash before them. But I do talk about in my book, in a couple of chapters, one, my Pinhead chapter, I talk about Hellraiser and the whole concept of Christians borrowing from scary movies to get their ideas about hell. But I point out that hell is only mentioned in, I think, 20 scriptures in the whole Bible, 12 of which were said during Matthew, Mark, and Luke by Jesus, referring to the Valley of Hinnom, which I talked about earlier. The other 8 were just, either Hades, which, Hades could mean death, Sheol, which is interpreted Hades, which death, or the Greek idea of, house of the dead, whatever, wasn't a permanent place of torture. That wasn't the idea that was behind it. And there's a place called Tartarus, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, that talks about the fallen angels that sinned during the flood. They're being kept there for judgment. There's not anything about a permanent place that people will go and be tortured for all eternity. It's not there. But so I think it's interesting that the lady in her book, she quotes this, and I want to use this in my book because I wanted to show that, that's the way people look at it, that fear is the cornerstone of Christianity. It holds the whole house together. But I would disagree. I don't think that's right. And that's what I want to change, is that Christianity is not built upon fear. It's not. And like I said, the whole concept of fear, being the cornerstone, it's very wrong, because when I read the Bible, like I said, there's 20 verses talks about hell, most of them in the New Testament, then most of them, spoken by Jesus. When I took those, it was less than, I think 0.5% of the entire New Testament, let alone the entire Bible. So if the doctrine of hell is influencing your doctrine more than 1%, are you matching the way that the Bible is showing the doctrine of hell? Because the Bible only talks about it less than 1%. So if you're not matching what the Bible's showing, then you're just coming up with your own stuff. Just own it. That's a Christianity you want to live by. Just know it's not real. It's fake. It's a false god. It's not Jesus. You can call him Jesus, but it's not Jesus. Jesus doesn't scare people into believing him. The goodness of the Lord that brings us to repentance, Paul said. He wrote a few books in the Bible. I think he knew what he was talking about. So in this chapter, I actually talk about Hunter Thompson, and I talk about kind of the comparison of Ezekiel. Ezekiel is such a great prophet. The book is so weird. If you ever want to read, and I mentioned this, I actually put this in my chapter. I put the whole first chapter of Ezekiel in the King James version, so you could read it in the King James. And I said, but I want you to read it as if you're reading it in Hunter S. Thompson's voice. And it just makes it so much more interesting. But Ezekiel is so full of weird stuff. But the term they used about Hunter Thompson, which he kind of invented, is the whole concept of the gonzo reporter. It's the person who puts themselves into the news. They become involved in what's going on. And that's kind of what Ezekiel did. Ezekiel kind of threw himself into the middle of what was going on in Israel, as well as eventually in Babylon. And he was very much like Hunter S. Thompson. I mean, some of the things that he saw, you would believe that he probably got into some good mushrooms there on the banks of Chabar. But yeah, and I felt like it was such a good comparison between the two. But ultimately, because I wanted to show something that I felt like was said very well in, you want to read a good Hunter S. Thompson book? Yes, definitely read Fear and Loathing, Las Vegas. Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail. I mean, there's a few different ones that are very good, but what you got to realize is the whole disillusionment. And that's kind of what I was getting at here, is the disillusionment of the church, that everything was boiled down to this fear. Follow me or be afraid. Listen to what I'm saying or be afraid. Obey the words, or obey the way that I'm telling you to do it, or be afraid. And by the way, I'm sorry, if you have a question here, I see things every now and then pop up. So if I didn't answer your question, then, and I'm just going through to see if I missed any. I think I answered all those. Okay. But if I haven't answered your question, go ahead and throw it out there again. I'll answer it for you again. But let me go back to this. So Ezekiel he saw some crazy stuff, and it's amazing. It's worth a read. And leaving it for just what it is. I don't interpret it. I'm not sitting here trying to explain what a wheel within a wheel with eyeballs all over it, what that is. It's crazy. Actually, there's a word for it. They're used by more like theologians. It's not used in the Bible, but it's called the Ophrium. That's what they call it. Kind of like a seraphim or a cherubim. You got Ophrium. And, yeah, weird. I don't know. But the thing that I wanted to really point out is the fact that God does not use fear to make a point. He doesn't. Every time an angel shows up on earth, you always see, what's the first thing they say? Don't fear. Well, because they know they're scary as heck. So if you read in the Bible, angels are not little, like, fluffy babies. You know, they're pretty terrifying. They're definitely not people you want to mess with. Some might look human. Some might not. Some might be very far from human. They don't have to be, because they're not humans. I mean, they don't live on Earth. They're not bound to the same three-dimensional space and one-dimensional time that we live in. You know, they're outside of that. So they can look like a wheel with a bunch of eyeballs if they wanted to. And it's very surreal. And I love a lot of the things in Ezekiel are very surreal. But what I point out in this chapter, one thing I do is that, yeah, there are extra-dimensional creatures. I mean, I believe that. I believe that there are creatures that operate in a different realm than we do. And I mean, you see it in Jesus. When Jesus rose from the dead, he was able to appear and disappear into rooms. He was able to fly up into heaven. He was able to eat. He was able to drink. He was able to, do physical things. But then he would do things that didn't make sense in our three-dimensional space. Well, that's because he was an extra-dimensional creature. As having a spiritual body, he was not bound. Because for something to be bound to our time-space dimension, so our three-dimensional space, we have three dimensions that we live in with a one dimension of time. So three dimensions meaning we can go up, down, side to side. You can move all around. Here's your world. Everything's in three dimension. You're looking at me at two dimension, but this is actually three dimensions. You look at me on a flat screen, so it's kind of hard to explain that. But this is all three dimensions. You live in a one dimension of time, meaning your time is always moving forward. You can't go back, can't go to the side, can't go up, can't go down. You are always stuck in a forward moving time. But there are creatures, the Bible refers to them as Elohim, that when people try to say angels, that's like saying all humans are UPS drivers. Angels were usually specific creatures that had specific tasks, which had to do with being messengers or delivering a message. But not all these creatures could be angels. I mean, they're called the sons of God. They're called stars of heaven. They're called a lot of different things. And they could follow God, or they could decide not to. And if they decide not to, as the Bible says in Psalms 82, they're judged for not doing what God wanted them to do. And I talk about this whole concept. I mean, we talk about ghosts. We talk about, UFOs or aliens. We talk about angels and demons and devils and all these things. And we have a I guess you could say our language has kind of a framework for it, but the problem is it's been religiousized and it's missed the point. I'm talking of something real, something that exists in this real world, what I would call the real world. And part of the real world is a spiritual realm. It's a different dimension. It's a different realm. It's not like a realm with a bunch of ghosts. People think like that. A bunch of invisible ghosts. No, it's just that realm is experienced differently. Just like, how would you explain a three-dimensional space to a two-dimensional creature? If the two-dimensional creature's whole world was a flat, literal flat plane, no up, no down, nothing, just a flat plane. They can go, the directions you can go on a piece of paper. How do you explain it 3 dimensions to that? You can't explain it. I kind of can see it in, it's like trying to explain, you take a 2-dimensional square. How do you take a 2-dimensional square and turn it into a 3-dimensional square? Well, a 3-dimensional square is a cube, okay? So a 2-dimensional circle, right? A 3-dimensional circle is a sphere, all right? You see how you could do that. But then how do you go up the next level? What's that look like? What's it look like to be able to experience each moment of time on its own? That you don't have to consistently be moving forward. You can go forward, backwards, up, down, go to different places and enjoy different moments. I mean, if time was 3-dimensional, and that's just assuming time's 3-dimensional. It could be a lot more dimensions than that. I don't know. I mean, time is relative. The amount of time that passes for you changes based upon, the speed you're traveling. I mean, that's basic science. I mean, that's Albert Einstein. I mean, it's not weird. So but the interesting thing is that for something to have mass, for something to have mass means that you can move through time. You can exist in this 3-dimensional world, but you have to have mass. So the reason why light can travel the speed of light is it has no mass. It's massless. So anything that's massless is not bound to the normal natural laws. It's outside of those laws. And what I'm talking about is something that doesn't have mass in the way that we understand it. It's something else. What it is, I don't know. But see, that's what the Bible talks about. And that's kind of what I was talking about in this chapter. It's that whole concept of that there is something bigger out there. There is a universe that's bigger than us, that is influencing our universe, that we are physically playing a part of, but yet can't technically see it, can't always, touch it, taste it, smell it, but it's there, and it's always influencing things. You see it on the news. And like I said earlier, I mean, think of the evil that one person can do. One man in power, one leader in power. I mean, Paul called it, there were these demons and devils that he called principalities and powers, might, dominion. Paul had names for these things, and they usually were, just like in Daniel, they were powers or evil spirits that were over certain areas. Now that's weird. Now that's weird. But, I mean, that could be it. We could be seeing the working of this other dimension in our dimension. We can see the effects of the working of this other dimension in our dimension by the way that the world is being influenced, by the things that are changing, by the evil that's being done. And it sucks. It's horrible. So I talk about a lot of this. I talk about, the concept of extra-dimensional creatures. I talk about that a few times in the book because, the book's the extra-dimensional madness of the prophets. So I had to talk about some extra-dimensional stuff. But I like the idea that the Bible promises us that one day we will have the same body as Jesus had, this resurrected body. And it's like we're going to shed this mortal shell and become extra-dimensional versions of ourselves. That's crazy to think about. That's what the Bible promises. One of the other things, too, I talk about in this chapter that's really interesting is, so if you haven't, go and look up a Wikipedia or whatever about Hunter S. Thompson so you can get a basic idea. You know what I'm talking about. But in the 1970s, he ran for sheriff of Aspen, Colorado, And it got a lot of people's attention because he was trying to get, what he said, the freaks, the maniacs, the weirdos out and to vote. And he wanted to change some things. He wanted to make a difference. And he wrote an article in the Rolling Stones called "Freak Power in the Rockies," and he kind of talked about some of the things he was saying. But I like this quote. He says, "Why not run an honest freak and turn him loose on their turf to show up all the normal candidates for the worthless losers they are and always have been." Like, he was like a pipe bomb. He wanted to say, hey, just run a freak loose and see what happens. He had ideas that were very different than the ones that we hold as normal, or the way that society should run. And because of that, he didn't win. He actually only lost by a few votes, to tell you the truth. I mean, if it was in today, they would have cried for a recount because it was so close. But he said, Hunter Thompson said, to deviate from the style of government that I deplore today is not only wise but necessary. And that's where I would agree, that to deviate from the style of government that I deplore today is not only wise but necessary. We've got to make a difference. We got to change the way that we're living. And this is probably where I'm going to finish off today. This is a good place to stop because I got a chance to kind of talk about these few chapters here. And if you still haven't gotten my book yet, Adam is God, Eve is Us, it's on sale everywhere you can buy books. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, Walmart, they're everywhere. So get a hold of the book. My new book, Puppies and Napalm, The Extra-Dimensional Madness of the Prophets, is going to be coming out here in the next few months. And I'm going to keep doing lives and come on here and talk about it. So thank you so much for listening to me, everybody. Hopefully I answered all your questions. If I didn't, just put send me a little note, and I will definitely answer it the next time I do a live. All right. Thank you all for tuning in. And it's Jason Malott saying goodbye.